recognize two of my leadership team who are here at the board, who are on the board of the San Diego County Democratic Party. My vice chair from the Metro West area, where you are now, Rebecca Taylor. And our vice chair for the East area, Eric Herford. We'll also be running our school keeping time, so when the candidates come out, we'll point that out. And then also, I just saw the interim chair of the California Democratic Party's African American caucus, Taisha Brown. And then we're going to get started. Y'all ready? Yeah. All right. So the candidates had their selection. Well, their selection on the podium is done alphabetically one way, and then their start time. We'll be cycling through the questions randomly. It'll be randomly the first time, and then I'll go through it. I have it all written down. But anyway, so our first candidate, Tasha Williamson. Not yet.
Am I in the right spot?
You're in the right spot.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Thank you.
And everybody can hear you apparently, so we're good to go. All right, for our second candidate, Assembly Member Todd Gloria. And Councilmember Barbara Green. Thank you for coming, candidates. Just to go over the rules again, there will be 3 minutes for your own introductions, 2 minutes for answers for each question, 1 minute for rebuttal in case a candidate mentions another candidate in their remarks, and there could be 1 minute follow-up questions for either myself or Clark, or Charles, sorry. And then your timekeeper, if you could wave the timekeeper over here, is our vice chair from the East area, Eric Herford. There is a 30-second time. Are you ready, Eric? 30 seconds. Can y'all see that? Yep. There's a 10-second. Y'all can see that? And then there's a stop. And it's red. All right? All right, so we're going to get started, and I'll turn it over to Charles.
Yeah, so let's start with our statements. Tasha, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Tasha Williamson, and I'm running for mayor because I am the people's mayor. We have a 2020 vision that is clear and straight. We know what we are doing because we have been doing this all of our lives. We have been supporting families. We have been supporting the working class. We have been supporting those who are reentering. We have been supporting people in education. We walk the walk and talk the talk. We have moved about this city and this county, taking care of the working class and those who are poor. We make sure that people have access to services, that they know the laws, that they understand how to be supported and where to get that support. We believe that the people will have the say. The people are the ones who need to have the importance and know the importance of the vote. That votes cannot and should not just vicariously be given away. That the people have been hurt and damaged and stuck where we are for so long that now is the time to take the stand, to talk about real progressive moves, to make sure that in 12 years we have changed the bad air quality and the damage that has happened in our communities, in some of our communities the worst. We want to make sure in this campaign that as a movement for the people, we make sure that we think and consider all people. That we let you know by our actions that we are changing government and not talking about transparency, but we are transparent. That we walk with you, that we canvass even after we become candidates, that we make sure that you see us every day in every way and not just when it is publicized. You should know that the candidate that you have before you, myself, I am involved. I am not just progressive because it is a word, I'm a progressive because it is a way of life. And when I move for the people. I'm a representative already, and I've already done so much. So I appreciate it. We just launched our Facebook page today, TashaForMayor.com. We will be launching our website in 5 days, and we ask you to look at them, view them, like them, join the movement. Make sure that you become part of a movement that is really progressive, that is really about the people, for the people, because we're of the people. Thank you.
You're up.
Thank you. Good evening, Democrats. It is wonderful to be here. To both Will and Charles, thank you for moderating. Thank you to San Diego City College for hosting us. And of course, to my fellow Democrats who are here more than a year before the election. This gives me hope that we are fired up to make real change in 2020. You all ready for some change? My name is Todd Gloria, and I'm running for mayor of San Diego. I'm running for mayor because as a third generation San Diegan, I know where our city has been. But more importantly, I have a vision for where I would like to take us. If I had to diagnose the biggest problem that our city faces, it is that we are a big city that too often acts like a small town. You see this in every single day in every single way. We are the 8th largest city in the United States, but we have the 4th largest homeless population in the United States. The traffic congestion you probably sat in to get here today is reflective of the fact that we do not have a world-class public transportation system. The best example I can give you is that we have a light rail system and an international airport that are next to one another, and yet they don't connect. Housing affordability. We know that increasingly more and more people, not just at the low and very low income levels, but those who are in the working and middle classes can't see a future for themselves here, can't make the rent, don't ever see being able to buy a home, and consequently are considering moving somewhere else. This campaign is about changing that narrative. It is about being bold in our leadership and making sure that we are building a brighter and better future for every San Diego. I've lived this in my life. I don't come from privilege. I'm the son of a hotel maid and of a gardener who worked extremely hard, who were able to buy a home in the city and put their 2 kids through college, the first in our family to go. That was possible 25 years ago. But I think if we're being honest with ourselves, that's not so possible today. The only reason why we should be optimistic about that is that we've come to this situation because of a series of choices that we have made. And I'm standing here before you as a candidate for mayor saying that we can make different choices to reestablish those pathways upwards, to make sure that the story that I have lived does not end with my generation, but that future generations of San Diegans can see a place where they can live here, they can build wealth here, they can raise a family here, that they can have a future here. For any of you who think that it's impossible for San Diego to lead, there was a time when I actually got to serve as mayor. I like to remind people I served for 8 months. I'd now like the opportunity to do it for 8 years. As mayor of San Diego, we authored a climate action plan that was landmark. We were the first big city in the United States to commit to going to 100% renewable energy. That was 5 years ago. We did it with a unanimous bipartisan vote of the city council. Fast forward to today, cities across this county, the state of California, have followed our lead in moving to 100% renewable energy. Ladies and gentlemen, when San Diego leads, other people follow. This campaign is about making sure that San Diego leads so you can have a better future for yourself and for your family. Sorry about that.
I'm just grateful.
Barbara, the floor is yours.
Good evening. I'm Barbara Breen. It was just 4 years ago that I set out to run for public office for the first time, never expecting that 4 years later I'd be running for mayor. But what I found when I got to City Hall is quite frankly something you all deserve to know. And that is, City Hall is a mess. And it didn't get there overnight. I want our city to be a model of equity, economic equity, social justice equity, environmental equity, and politics as usual is not going to get us there. I've spent my life as either the only woman in the room or one of the few women in the room, standing up for others, challenging the status quo, and getting things done. As a new council member, I was the first elected official to stand up against the Soccer City land grab, which, if it had passed, would have blown a hole in us being able to meet our climate action plan goals. When customers got higher than normal water bills, I demanded an audit of our city water department, and we found out that there was a lot wrong. What I've seen is that our city lurches from decision to decision with no long-term planning for important issues like how to deal with our growing and sad homeless situation. The recent issues with Airbnb and scooters are just two more examples of our city government being reactive and not proactive as new technologies come along. I'm a mom, I'm a grandma, and when I make decisions, I'm thinking about my children and my grandchildren and what our city is going to be for them. I'm a business owner. I'm a community volunteer. I'm a nonprofit board member. I've served on many boards like Planned Parenthood. I've started and led 2 organizations that empower women, Athena San Diego and Run Women Run. And early in my career, I was a journalist holding government officials accountable. From that, I learned to listen, to ask questions, and to be relentless about getting the story. I want to be relentless for you in making sure local government works for you. And I want to make sure that we make decisions in San Diego, not Sacramento. Your choice in this election is clear. Between a change agent with a demonstrated track record of success or more of the same. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. So now on to our first question, and our first question will be posed to Todd. Millions has been spent to address homelessness, and we still have thousands of people living on the streets, unfortunately. Historically, we've also seen San Diego and other communities, or seen in San Diego and other communities that well-intentioned factions are not always on the same page with addressing these things. So my question for you all is a consolidated approach the best system for addressing homelessness? And what specifically would you like to see done to combat the problem?
Thank you for that question, Charles. It is certainly the biggest issue facing our city today. It's a moral crisis to have thousands of people in a city sheltered on our streets. The first thing we need to do is quit doing dumb stuff. When you look at the city's current approach, the approach involves putting jagged rocks over freeways, buying bankrupted skydiving facilities for homeless services, although it will never house anyone, and importantly, and most recently, criminalizing being poor and homeless. We have to stop doing that. You asked what I'd like to do. I will tell you that I will move homeless services under the office of the mayor. Currently, it's outsourced to the Housing Commission. It sends a message to anyone that this is not a priority for this administration or for this city hall, because if you want to talk about homelessness, you don't go to City Hall, you go to 11th and Broadway. It has to be in the mayor's office where the people have to look me in the eye every day and explain to me what they have done to solve this problem. Second is accountability and transparency. As you mentioned, we're spending more than we ever have on this issue, and yet we're not seeing the progress that is necessary. Any person can tell you that means that we're not spending the money effectively. If you get city money in the Mayor Gloria administration, you will have to show how you're spending these funds. Explain to the public what that noise is. Explain to the public how you're spending those funds and what results you're getting. Those who cannot show positive results will be defunded. Those who are showing good results will get more funds. And lastly, of course, the way you solve this problem, the way you solve homelessness, is with more housing. Housing that is affordable to people who are struggling on our streets. And so you asked, is there a consolidated solution to this? The answer is, of course it is. This is going to require not just collaboration between the city and the county of San Diego, the city with the Housing Commission, the county with the Mental Health Services Office and the Substance Abuse Department, but also with every city in this county. And I'm proud to have the endorsement of County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher, who believes I'm the right choice to be the next mayor of San Diego, along with the support of many mayors across this county. We will work collaboratively to end chronic homelessness just as other cities across this nation has done. If Salt Lake City and other places like it have been able to do this, San Diego certainly should be able to do this.
Thank you, Todd. Barbara, same question to you.
Addressing our growing and sad homeless situation starts with acknowledging that people become homeless for different reasons. What I've learned from talking with homeless individuals who I'm meeting with regularly in my office is they become homeless for different reasons. Many San Diegans live paycheck to paycheck, and if they have a serious illness or an accident, they are thrown onto the street. So we have to address each individual with what is best for them, and our system has failed them in this way. Most importantly, we need to build more housing, and I'm very proud that under this council, through the Rules Committee, we are moving a $900 million housing bond more forward toward the November 2020 ballot. This will allow us to access state money to be able to build between 5,000 and 8,000 more supportive housing units. This will go a long way toward accomplishing our goal of managing our homeless situation. Although even if we got everybody off the street tomorrow, somebody new would become homeless the next day. They would lose a job. They would have a mental health problem. So what it's really about is building a system in cooperation with the county, which has been slow to stand up and cooperate and spend the billions of dollars of resources they have and can put toward this effort. As mayor, this will be a priority out of my office. Mr. Gloria mentioned the Housing Commission. It actually is part of the city. So to create another bureaucracy in City Hall is not something I would do. I would work closely with the existing Housing Commission, which is managing our bridge shelters and our storage center, and I would have key members of my staff who would work closely with them on what they're doing. Thank you.
Before we move on to Tasha, I'd like to give Todd an opportunity to respond to the Housing Commission.
I'm well aware that the Housing Commission is a component unit of the City of San Diego. I served on its board for 3 years. The point I'm making is that while I was on the City Council during the depths of the recession, we created an operating agreement to outsource homeless services responsibilities to the Housing Commission. It was a reasonable decision at that time because they had the resources to provide more services and more full-time employees to solve this problem than the city could during the economic recession. But my point is this: across the nation where you see transformational change on homelessness, it is under the extreme leadership of the mayor. In Houston, Texas, a 60% reduction of on-street homelessness without spending an additional nickel. Why did that happen? The mayor of Houston put this as a civic priority. And right now, if you go to 3rd and C, you will not see homeless services on the door there. You have to go to 11th and Broadway. The message is sent to every city employee and every nonprofit provider that the priority is not at City Hall, it's somewhere else. If we're going to solve this problem, it must be a priority for the mayor. It will be my top priority as your mayor.
Tasha, returning to the original question, is a consolidated approach the best system for addressing homelessness? And what specifically would you like to see done to combat the problem?
Yes, so many of you have heard me talk about it. I believe, yes, we need to collaborate, consolidate, and move in the right direction for homelessness. Again, I don't talk it. I'm not a mouthpiece for it. I've actually lived. I've been homeless. I've actually lived right now, currently, supporting homeless. So this is what I do. So I see the wrongs that have happened, and they have happened long before the current administration. And so when we talk about homelessness and we talk about 10,000, that is not the actual number. It is 74,000 people who are homeless in the county and the city of San Diego. And that are real numbers, mean real people, and those are people who are hurting. And whether we have them at C Street or 10th Street, we need to make sure that people are serviced with wraparound services, services that meet their needs. people who help them navigate those services. We don't currently have those things working. No one is talking to the other. We are not meeting the demand, and we are not meeting the needs, and we have spent well over $100 million of your tax dollars, and people have gotten rich off of it. And the homeless has stayed homeless. And so we need to be real about it. When we had the epidemic and the outbreak, then we want to react. I don't want to be reactionary. I want to actually implement things that I know that work because they're working right now. We currently collaborate with the county, the state, and the federal government to support people who are coming here to the city, support people here in the city getting services, and it works. It works when you actually are inclusive and you do what you say you can do. When people realize if they just take the labels off and we sit at the table and we actually get the services to the people that need them, it works. We have helped every day tens, 20s, thousands of people actually understand where to go to get services. Actually help people who can't get those services navigate them, walk with them, show them how. Those are the things that need to happen. People who are homeless are being disenfranchised. They are being neglected, and I will make sure that stops.
With homelessness, there's a tendency that homeless services and facilities tend to be isolated in one particular area. The thinking being that it's easier access. Right now, we see both the county and Governor Newsom arguing that that's a big part of the problem and homeless services should be more dispersed. Do you believe in a more concentrated or dispersed approach? And if you fall into the latter camp, how specifically would you collaborate with the county and other cities in the region to meet these issues? Barbara, you lead us off.
Thank you. So first of all, I voted against the contract for family health centers to operate the navigation center in what has been the skydive center. I voted against it because I believe it is much more effective to send social workers out with iPads to talk to homeless individuals where they are, to send out social workers, not police officers, to talk to homeless individuals where they are. The county should be paying for these social workers. That is their job. They are in charge of human and health and human services. We have a growing opioid crisis in our country. We have a growing number of individuals with mental health issues in our country. This is the responsibility of the county. We need the county to step up. It needs to be done with trained professionals reaching out to people where they are. And at the end of the day, we need to build more housing, more of what's called permanent supportive housing, which is what this proposed $900 million bond measure would do.
Thank you. Tasha, same question to you.
So I think we need to keep it real. Before, homeless outreach team used to be able to actually get people into beds, into shelters, into transitional centers. They actually have a contract. When Chief Neslight, because of the command of the mayor, Faulkner, told them that he wanted them to get rid of the homeless population that was downtown because they were building, and people who were moving into those developments did not want to come out and see those homeless people. He didn't want to drive by and see homeless people. And so they pushed them into other communities. And so when we talk about police actually making contact, originally the homeless outreach team, which is the police, they made contact to get services. They actually didn't do arrests until Mayor Faulkner told them to make this problem go away. And so for me, I think that we have a multitude of things that we need to do. There's not one solution to this problem because this problem is huge. It is a crisis. There are people that are living place to place in their cars. There are people that are living on the streets in hotels, don't know when they're going to be put out. There are people that are one check away when the rent will increase and they have to move. These people are from all walks of life. And so I think that we need to put people not only in the streets, we need to have somewhere where people can go in every neighborhood that is a one-stop shop. We don't need to send people to HHSA and then to DMV and then here and there and all these different spots because people get lost in that. I'm already homeless. We need to make it convenient. We need to make sure that they can get the access to services, and we need to make sure that there are people that are really working there that are committed to homeless people, that have the customer service skills and have the understanding and the expertise to get them the services. And if they teach them how to get services, then they can learn how to get them on their own. We can make sure that they move up and move out of homelessness into transitional housing, permanent housing, and then hopefully into home ownership. That is what we are talking about. We want people to become homeowners so that we can move them out.
Thank you. Barbara, same question to you. Oh, Todd, sorry.
I'm right
Todd,
here.
same question to you.
I think the question was whether or not we favor a centralized or decentralized approach to solving homelessness. And the answer is we currently have a decentralized problem, and the solution requires decentralization. The fact of the matter is we, by last count, and I agree with Tasha, the numbers are probably not so good, but the numbers is that, as reported to the federal government, are 8,100 homeless people in our county. And they're dispersed throughout our county. People think this is a downtown problem. As the former city council member for downtown, I can tell you it is most assuredly not a problem. The problem is dispersed. It is in the Beach and Bay communities. It is along the San Diego River. It is in every community in San Diego, and that means that if we're serious about solving this problem, every community is going to have to do its part to solve it. With respect, iPads are not going to solve this problem. More housing will solve this problem. And I have the track record to have actually done this on the city council. When I served, we helped to build Connections Housing at 6th and A. I ask you tonight as you leave, drive by that facility. I would defy you to know that that is a homeless services facility where over 200 formerly homeless people are living tonight. We have the family homelessness shelter at First and Elm. We have the Aspire Center for Homeless Veterans on San Diego Avenue, just a few blocks from where I live. In every one of those instances, communities were opposed to the project because they were afraid. But I wasn't afraid. I engaged in the conversation, built the consensus, and got those projects established. And that's what I'll do as mayor, to make sure that every community has the interventions that are necessary to end homelessness. We can do this, as I've already mentioned, other cities have. San Diego can too, and that's a part of breaking that small town mentality that says that we can't dream to end chronic homelessness. If others can, we can. My administration will make this a priority.
Thank you.
All right, so the next question. San Diego County boasts some of the most beautiful beaches and mountain preserves in the country. And the environment was one of the most asked about questions from our residents about this forum. So let's keep it simple. What would you do to preserve San Diego's environment and combat climate change? Specifically, and the first question goes to Tasha.
Thank you. When I think about what I would do for environment, it's what we will do for environment. Barbara talked about it, I've talked about it before as well. The things that we want to do is plant more trees because of the air quality. We are ranked the 8th worst air quality in the nation. 6th, worst air quality in the nation. I hope we can get to the 8th. Right. So one of the things that we need to do is to pull carbon out of the oxygen, out of the air. And so planting trees to do that will help. But also making sure we are supposed to be moving as a city to an all-electric fleet. We have not done that. There are a lot of things that people create but don't implement. And those are things that I'm tired of hearing about and doing. So the things that have not been done, we will make sure get implemented. We will make sure that we spend money wisely. Making sure that emissions is zero is important. Making sure that we have good climate is important. Making sure that we don't take away from the land that is preserved. To build, we have to have nature. We have to preserve lands that are meant for nature. I think that it is wrong when we forget that this is Mother Earth. I think it's wrong. I think that if we overdevelop, we damage the community, we damage the earth, we damage the air, and people aren't thinking about that. Because you know what? For the last 40 years, politicians have not been thinking about what is going to happen. We're now being told 12 years left. 12 years left. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to leave 12 years in the hands of people who haven't implemented an environment that is better for me and my children and my grandchildren.
All right. Todd?
Thanks for the question. In my opening, I made mention of the fact that when I served as the interim mayor, I helped to introduce and write our city's climate action plan. I'm the guy who wrote the climate action plan. Now I'm running to be mayor to be the guy who implements the climate action plan. The fact of the matter is, over the last 5 years, the city really hasn't shown the urgency that is necessary to implement this plan. Tasha's exactly right. You know, dithering on whether or not we move forward to a CCA, we knew that that was necessary years ago, and yet this administration and this city hall has not actually implemented. This mayor will. How do we protect our environment? Well, you're exactly right. We don't build urban sprawl out in our wildfire interface areas when we know that housing is not affordable, and it sure as heck is not an appropriate location, particularly when we deal in the context of climate change. Guys, this is real. San Diego sets itself apart because of our quality of life, because our environment, our natural resources. And so we have to fight like heck to preserve and protect them. Our climate plan is a comprehensive vision for what we can do, not to just protect our local environment, but what we can do as global leaders to export this out. I see this as an opportunity for economic development. I think that we can do big and bold things, and the climate plan is there if we just wish to follow it. The last thing is that this is very much an issue of housing and transportation. It's not about building housing anywhere at any price. It's about building the right housing in the right location. It's about building a transportation system. Over 40% of our emissions are from our transportation network. Under a bill that I voted for in the legislature, Assembly Bill 805, it gives the mayor of San Diego the opportunity to sit in the driver's seat at both Sandag and MTS, building a new transportation vision for our future. Our current mayor does not elect to use that authority. This mayor will, because good housing policy and good transportation policy is good climate policy, and that's going to be a priority in my administration.
Thank you. Barbara.
Climate change is the most important issue facing the world, and we need to do our part in San Diego. It starts with implementing community choice energy and making sure we do it in an equitable way so that every resident and every neighborhood will benefit from lower utility bills and lower greenhouse gas emissions. As a businesswoman, I am with the right background to oversee that this is done the right way. Otherwise, there are great risks that we could have a lot of problems. Second, it's about development and where we build new housing. We need to build more housing around transit. And last week, your city council updated community plans along transit in the Balboa and Morena Boulevard corridors to allow for thousands of more housing units just where they should be built along the new trolley that's going to go from downtown to the UTC area. It was one of the best things that any city council has done in the last decade. We also took another important vote to preserve precious open space, which is something we need to do at the same time that we're approving new development. Unfortunately, we lost that vote. I was on the losing side, but I tried to preserve what is called the Del Mar Preserve, some of our most precious open space. There is plenty of developable land nearby where biotech and high tech can expand. It did not have to grow in this area. Most of all, though, we need to engage everybody in our community. And from my experience building and leading 2 member-driven organizations, every San Diegan has to feel they're going to have a part in how they can combat climate change. That's why my vision of a tree planting program in every neighborhood is how I will bring it to every resident. Everyone can plant a tree.
Thank you. So one quick follow-up that I'm going to pose to each of you as it relates to the climate, and timekeeper, if you wouldn't mind, let's try to keep this to a 1-minute answer. You walk into City Hall, day one, you have the political power behind you to instantly implement one initiative to address climate change and the environment. Which do you choose? Tasha, you first.
First day walking in, I'm going to choose to work on changing the air quality because our air quality is horrible, and it's worse in districts 4, 8, and 9. And if we don't begin to change the air quality for everyone, including those districts, people will continue to have health disparities that are killing them. And so I am working on the things that are drastic. Those are the things I want to work on first. Things where people are dying, where there are health disparities because of our environment. And that's what I will be working on. That, along with making sure that we have clean water in every district, everywhere, and every school.
Thank you. Todd.
Day one. I won't need to find the bathroom. I did the job once before, so I know where that's at. I would say there's a lot of stuff that we could do on day one, but the one that kind of comes to mind in terms of what's easy to do is the fact that when we have these fights about bike lanes and pedestrian improvements, this is often about a can of paint and the ability to just move forward with leadership. We have an adopted bicycle master plan that isn't always faithfully implemented. And it's hard to do, but increasingly, as I mentioned, transportation policy is climate policy. And so we have to actually start implementing this. That is something that is achievable on day one under mayoral direction. We have a strong mayor. A mayor can tell city streets division to start going out and making this happen. We have a mayor that's starting to engage to do this. And we hope, as Tasha mentioned, the urgency of this issue requires urgent action. Probably the second thing would be to give a call over to Sandag and say, we're going to start changing things over there. We're going to start supporting public transit and active transportation because it's critical to the future of our quality of life.
Thank you. Same question to you.
I think we're only going to be successful with all of this if we truly engage all our residents. So on my first day, I'm going to go to every council district and plant a tree in every council district with that council member and leaders in that community. I want to send a message that I'm the mayor for the entire city, that I will be out there, that I will be accessible, that I will be talking to people on a regular basis, that I will not be hiding on the 11th floor at City Hall. And I think that is one of the most important messages our new mayor can send, that they are truly there for our residents, that they are there for our children, that they are there for our grandchildren, that they are not going to govern by press conference. Thank you.
Thank you all. So this also came up a bit in all of those answers. Transportation and transit. You know, obviously that is one of the most hotly debated topics right now. Just look at something like Sandag, where the divides are on full display. You know, so much of our conversation focuses on transit corridors. See, this is why I do print. Anyway, so much, you know, we focus on dense building, transit corridors, things like that, and mass transit, but we rarely hear a lot of conversation about reverse commuters, you know, people who live in urban areas but have to go out and work in the suburbs. So I guess, you know, I'm wondering, how do we address this issue in particular, and how do we clear the congestion? Todd, you have the first answer.
We were asking about reverse commute, and I mean, we all know what that is, you know, in terms of everyone going home tonight, right now, sitting on the 805 and the 5 South to go down to Chula Vista, or in the opposite direction up to, sadly, increasingly South Riverside County to find housing that's affordable. You know, the reverse commute really requires a pro-housing agenda, and I've been very clear that I believe that the way that we're going to solve this housing crisis is to make sure that we're building more housing. Not anything, anywhere, but the right kind of housing near jobs and near public infrastructure and transit to make sure that that commute isn't what it is today. That housing has to be naturally affordable. I'm not talking about tall skyscrapers. That's the most expensive kind of housing that's out there. I'm talking about granny flats and duplexes, row homes, garden-style apartments, the stuff that is naturally affordable to people like myself and you who are struggling to make ends meet in this town. To your question, I mean, obviously the opportunity to build jobs where we're at, you know, I, as the former councilman for downtown, we have a community plan that envisions 90,000 people in downtown, and yet often we see the concentration of jobs up in the Golden Triangle. We have an incredible opportunity with the Horton Plaza redevelopment to do more high-tech jobs at that cluster. And then importantly, I think the next step is to take the city's investment, the dilapidated city hall that we have, and utilize that as an opportunity opportunity to bring more good jobs downtown and more housing that's affordable to our working class to downtown. I think there's a way to do that that really burnishes and improves our neighborhoods, and then importantly to push that out also into other communities, like the communities in districts 8 and 9 and 3 and where too often we hear that we can't invest there, but I know they can invest there. We have the light rail system, we have the community plans updated, and you need a mayor that's going to tell folks that if you want to grow in San Diego, grow in these communities where your workers are already living. That's how you stop the reverse commute.
Thank you. Barbara, same question.
I was a tech entrepreneur before I joined the city council, and actually was co-founder of a software company in 1995 that was one of the early tech companies downtown. Right now, the #1 employment center in the region is in the UTC Sorrento Valley area, and that commute in the morning going north is terrible. From the time I got to City Hall, I have talked about my vision for downtown, which centers on science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, full steam ahead, and how we're going to bring this to every neighborhood in San Diego so that all of our children growing up will have access to the high-paying jobs in the innovation economy and the good service sector jobs around it. Sadly, today, very few of the people who live downtown work downtown. And since I got to City Hall, I have been talking about revitalizing the City Hall site with a proper RFP, tearing down City Hall, Golden Hall, and the City Operations Building, and putting out an RFP to make it a catalyst for developing a technology center downtown. A technology center which offers job opportunities for San Diegans, internships for San Diego children, and a technology center in which the employers are deeply engaged with our schools, so they are helping to prepare the next generation. As a tech entrepreneur and a businesswoman, I am the right person, the right mayor to lead this effort and to make sure that our city has a strong economy in which our children and our grandchildren will benefit.
Thank you. Tasha, same question.
Thank you. I just want to keep it real again. When we talk about MTS, we need to talk about MTS for all of us, right? MTS is not safe for all of us. And so no one is talking about security of MTS. No one is talking about when Black and Brown and Pan-Asian and Indigenous people are on MTS and how they are treated. No one is talking about the fact that the cost is too expensive. No one is mentioning that. And so when we look at the changes that need to be made, yes, we need to have transportation that is for a big city, right? For a great big city with millions of dollars. But we also need to make sure that safety is a priority and that people who are on that MTS, on that bus, people, whether they are biking or driving, that they are safe. People want to be safe. We need to make sure that we are creating jobs that can bring people back into San Diego, because as we know, the city of San Diego, people have left jobs, not because of transportation needs, because we are not competitive. And so when we talk about bringing people and bringing jobs here, they have to be competitive jobs with great pensions, union or non-union. They have to have what everything is going to make people strong. I believe that unions can be stronger. I believe that we can do things that can build here on projects that we currently need done. There is plenty of money here, $80 million in park and recs repairs. Nobody is talking to unions about taking care of that. We are looking to build new projects and more projects, but we are not looking at the projects that need to be done, that people who are in unions and non-unions are contracting out to do this work outside in the county and outskirts of the city, and may live in the city and have to commute. We need to change the way we do business and make sure that we're looking for the people, with the people, by the people, and we're talking to the people and bring them to the table so that we can do actually what they need done and not what we think they need done.
Thank you very much. And that actually brings us to a follow-up, particularly about MTS. I believe it was a couple days ago, a staffer from the chair of MTS's staff, Councilmember Georgia Gomez's staff, was pulled off an MTS trolley, detained while he was in possession of a year pass because he failed to hit the bump, right? He had his pass, he failed to hit the bump or whatever. Even though he had a year pass, they pulled him out and they checked his background and just detained him for 15 minutes, so he got late with his day. So that shows that there are definitely people in the community, there are a different level of treatment in terms of how people interface with MTS. So my question would be, and Tasha has brought it up and brought it to the fore, what do you do, well, Todd and Barbara, what would you do to make sure that the experiences that people of color and people from underrepresented backgrounds have in terms of being safe on the community, safe on the MTS, and how you change that sort of discriminatory situation? Todd, if you could go first.
Well, that's not good, right? And you know, you laugh, but it's not funny, right? It's the lived experience of many of us who go about our daily lives being assumed about things. I was asked the other day at one of these forums, where'd I get that amazing tan? I said I was born this way. So I get that experience, I've lived it. And so it's personal for me. And so when I hear stories like this, I get angry. Because I'm about building a city that works for all of us. And I know that for too long, people that look like me who've not had the opportunities to be able to serve and to lead this community. And so I think the best way to start that is starting to change the leadership at the top. Georgette Gomez has been transformational for the leadership of MTS. And yet this is still happening, which shows you how difficult a work this is. As a mayor, I will not be afraid to roll up my sleeves and get personally involved when citizens are discriminated against. Because when you discriminate against one San Diegan, you discriminate against all of us. This is personal for me, and it will be personal for me as mayor. That kind of behavior is not acceptable. And as a member of the California legislature, I've done what I can to make sure that we make clear that we don't do immigration enforcement with local law enforcement and on our transits and in our courthouses and in our schools. And as mayor, I will not be afraid to continue that policy.
Barbara.
This kind of treatment of any San Diegan is unacceptable. And if I were the mayor, I would be calling the head of MTS, both the board chair and the executive director, and asking them to change their policies and to make sure that their staff undergoes training on how to treat passengers, customers. These are customers appropriately. It is unacceptable. It actually leads into a broader conversation about how we want everyone in our community to trust law enforcement, which is why I am a major supporter of an independent police review commission with subpoena power. Because community residents will only trust the police department if they know they have recourse if they have a bad experience. And this ties into what happened at MTS. People, if they have a bad experience on MTS, need to be able to have a place where they can go to complain and feel safe. Feeling safe is something that is essential to every San Diegan, whether it's in their home, walking down the street, or on MTS.
You brought it up, but I'm going to give you a minute to respond as well.
So what we need to know is we need to be educated. MTS is not a police force, it's a security force. They run themselves like a police force because they are a pipeline. The person who is head of that security force was a SDPD officer who was rogue. He had to resign from his position because he violated a policy with his son who was drunk, taking him out of the car and taking him home. So we need to be real about what we're talking about, and we need to be educated about it, because when we say we are for all San Diegans, and when we say that all San Diegans matter, when we say that if one is hurting, there are tens of thousands of us that are hurting right now, and it has not changed. It has not changed under this administration. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it is still the same. Matter of fact, it is worse. We talk about hate crimes that have happened. We talk about all of this stuff that has happened to people who are black, brown, indigenous, Pan-Asian, from other countries coming here. We need to be serious. Roll up your sleeves and fire some of these people. The things that we will do is we will press MTS to get rid of the chief, who's a security director, calling himself and his department a police force. They have no police powers, and they walk around our city and they damage people who look like me, people who don't understand the law, and it has been done under your administration and your administration, and it is time that it is over. It is enough. When we talk about stuff, you're going to have to pull up your sleeves, you're going to have to wear some jeans and some tennis shoes, and you're going to have to get out there in the trolleys with us in the trenches, and you're going to have to see how they treat us. Because, I'm sorry, formal complaints do not work for us. I have done them. The first thing that I will do, the first thing, is that I will push MTS, and I will even take money to make sure that MTS feels it. I will ask citizens to stop writing it. Because when you take and you hurt their pockets, they change.
All right. All right, so that is great. So we're going to move a little bit to something that's also as fiery, but not exactly the same. So I actually took a scooter here from my apartment downtown. So we're going to talk about scooters, and apparently that is almost as fiery as that.
Not quite.
So people have very strong feelings about this. From one area, almost everyone agrees we have to do something about it. Some people see it as like manna from heaven, and other people see it as like the sign of the end times in terms of scooters, and I think I've heard people call them scooter terrorists, and it's really bad. Anyways, what should our scooter rules be to ensure the safety of riders, pedestrians, and drivers? And I believe the first person to answer is Barbara.
When the scooters first started appearing on the downtown streets about 1.5 years ago, I went to the mayor. I said, Mayor, you need to do what mayors in other cities like San Francisco and Santa Monica have done, which is put on a moratorium, throw them out of the city for a while, step back, do an RFP, pick a few operators, and limit the number of scooters that can operate responsibly in San Diego. He decided not to do that, and we ended up with the Wild West. I even tried just to get a ban on the beach boardwalks last summer and could only get 2 of my council colleagues to agree with me. During this year, the situation became much worse. The legislative process through the council is torturous. We finally passed something on July 1. It went into effect. And then over Comic-Con weekend, the city impounded 2,500 scooters off of public property. And in addition, there's a private company called Scoot Removal that is picking up 500 scooters a day. And I have visited their scooter graveyard in Spring Valley. If you want to see an environmental nightmare, go see 7,000 scooters piled up in Spring Valley. It is terrible. So I want a moratorium so that we can step back, issue an RFP, and decide what makes sense for San Diego. A few days ago, I talked with Jean Regot, whose wife is in critical condition at UCSD with skull fractures and severe bleeding after falling off a scooter. I was in tears after I talked to him. And because of state legislation sponsored by Mr. Gloria, we cannot require scooter riders over the age of 18 to wear a helmet. So please, Mr. Gloria, you're going back to the legislature in a few weeks. Please rescind this terrible legislation so that cities have the right to require a helmet.
Todd, you have the opportunity to respond.
Is she done?
1 minute to respond, yes.
Oh, I just want to make sure she's finished. You shouldn't politicize someone's tragedy to win a mayor's race. I want to be very clear. I support the regulation of scooters. I support the regulation of scooters, and what was not mentioned is the legislation that we passed in Sacramento did a number of things. prohibited their use on sidewalks, prohibits double riding, demands that children wear helmets, makes it a crime to drive a scooter while under the influence. That's never mentioned in this dialogue, largely because it's not politically convenient to mention that. What is worse about it is that that law was passed in 2018, and yet the city has not done much to implement or to enforce it. Regulations are not as only useful if anyone's willing to actually police and enforce them, and that's not what you have seen in San Diego. Absent of city leadership for a year and a half, these companies have had free reign in San Diego. We finally have some regulations on the books, and my opponent now wants to throw those out the window. If the regulations need changing, then let's change them. Let's have a dynamic cap on the number of scooters we have here. Let's limit the number of providers that we have. We can do it better. Other cities, as is mentioned, have done it. Why can't we? It's the lack of leadership, and as has already been mentioned, City Hall is a mess. Well, I think I know one of the things that is causing a mess in San Diego.
Thank you. Before I move on to Tasha, and I'm actually going to pose this to all three of you, what specific regulations would you like to see? And also your opportunity to respond, Ms. Bree.
I'd like to see a limit on the number of scooters and on the number of companies. I think that would be the starting point. Right now, we are using police officers and lifeguards to enforce scooter regulations. They are both expensive and they are understaffed. Our police officers need to be doing neighborhood policing. Our lifeguards need to be saving people who are in the water. We do not have the city resources to enforce what we have today, which is the wild, wild west. And I resent it being said that I am politicizing someone's tragedy. By accident, I ran into this man on the street when I was taking a walk outside of City Hall, and he was in tears and recognized me and came up to me and talked to me. And I care deeply about him and about the future of his wife.
Thank you. Tasha, and Todd, I'll come back to you as well in just a moment. But Tasha, the original question regarding what you would like to see done with scooters, and specifically, if you wouldn't mind getting into maybe some regulations you'd like to see.
Thank you. So I think that for us who have been in this city, who have been discriminated against, I'm not sure where my opponents have been, but the police department has been ticketing scooters since they started. They were ticketing people and they were stopping people, and it was almost like a pretext stop. You didn't have a helmet on, we could stop you, give you a ticket, and find out who you were. So that is how we are profiled in this great city. Oftentimes, at the discretion and the support of the mayor and the silence of the city council. And so I want to push things where before we actually allow businesses to do things, that we sit down at the table and we make sure that it's going to be beneficial for not only the city, but the people in the city and the business. We pushed out as a city scooters, not knowing. I don't think any of us knew what it was going to become, but I don't think any of us sat at the table. So I think that when people say we're going to put everybody at the table, we're going to have seats for you, I'm really talking about that because that's what we do. We currently do that. We make sure that before we're going to do something that's going to impact a whole cultural group, a whole community, neighborhoods, everybody, that we sit at the table and we discuss it. They're getting ready to impact businesses, and they're not even talking to the business about what they can do on their own. And I think that we need to bring those scooter businesses to the table and say, hey, what can you do? Let's bring the people that have been impacted. How about we repay some of those people that got tickets because those were people who were poor. How about we reimburse them? Many of them had warrants because they couldn't pay the ticket because they didn't show up. And so these are things that are happening. And when we do business, we need to really do business. We need to think about everybody, just like we say, it's not a slogan, it's got to be a way of life.
Thank you, Tasha. And then quickly to Todd, the follow-up. Any specific regulations you'd like to see in addition to the ones you mentioned?
I would be happy to. When the City Council was considering its scooter ordinance, I sent a letter detailing some of the suggestions that I had to improve upon the proposed ordinance. These would be things like limiting the number of providers. Most other cities don't have nearly the number of providers that we have. A dynamic cap, making sure that we don't have endless numbers of scooters, but the right amount of scooters in the right communities. We know that not every community is served. This is not necessarily equitable, and we should fix that. That we have a public education process to make sure that people know how these work. Listen, a ban is a very easy thing to say, but it is not good policy. Other cities are not pursuing this. We can implement this correctly, and I would point out that our climate action plan demands the city find more ways to get people from A to B besides their car. And lastly, I would say our transportation network has many vulnerabilities. We should be concerned about those who are harmed and hurt by scooters, but we should also be concerned about the dozens of people who die who are pedestrians in our communities because we haven't adequately implemented our Vision Zero proposals. That the number of cars in our community also takes many people from our community. Transportation could be made safer if you had a mayor that focused and prioritized transportation. As I already mentioned, utilizing the authority under AB 805, I will do that.
Thank you. So, moving forward into another one of our hot topics here, housing. So, there's a lot of debate going on regarding local control and the state's role in addressing the affordable housing crisis. Some worry about the state potentially overreaching or, losing that local ability to, make our rules. Others say that, well, the cities haven't done enough already. I believe our current governor actually made that case, and you're trying to force action. So to our candidates, where do you stand on this issue? And if you, regardless of where you fall on it, do you feel there needs to be some kind of safeguards when it comes to state influence? And I believe starting out with this question is Tasha.
I think that as a city, we can handle our business. I think that we need support from the state, but I don't think that we need the state to come in and take over anything, if that's what I heard in your question. One of the things I think that we're not doing, I keep hearing affordable, but I don't know how many people can afford affordable. Affordable is not affordable. Affordable is not affordable. And we need to take that word, affordable, because it's like put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. We need to take that word out because it's not affordable. We need housing for all. Housing where people who can afford based on their incomes to live, and we're not gouging you where we are spending 80% and 90% of our incomes to house. That is unimaginable. Nobody will own a home at that rate. What we are trying to do is we are looking at transitional housing. We are looking at the homeless, trying to get them into housing, and we have to be realistic because there are some people who are not going to, we have people that are on drugs, we have people that are mentally ill that are also impacted in the homeless population, and we have to find ways to help get them healthy so that we can get them into housing. Those are some of the dynamics. We are looking at the people who are working class and making sure that we can actually get them into housing where they can afford it, save, and own homes. Own homes here in the city of San Diego. Guess who does that? Child welfare services. Why are we not looking at how child welfare services transitions people out of their program into homes and they own them? It's called a stability plan. Why don't we, as a great city, $3.94 billion in a budget, have stability plans for all? That's what we should be talking about. Stop talking about affordability because a $3,000 apartment is not affordable.
Todd, same question to you.
So our housing affordability crisis is the biggest issue in the city of San Diego, and it's most clearly expressed in our homelessness crisis. But this is not a San Diego only issue. This is a California issue. We are the most prosperous state in the nation, yet we have the highest poverty rate in the nation. And the reason for that is our housing crisis. Cities like San Diego are stepping up, and they're doing what they can, but even cities like San Diego are missing the mark when it comes to their housing production goals, and we must do more. More importantly, I think when we ask neighborhoods in San Diego to do their part, we have to do it with the belief and knowledge that other cities are also going to do their part. I think you've seen the state take aggressive action against cities like Huntington Beach and others that are thumbing their nose at their responsibilities under the state law for housing production. Why does this statewide problem have to be shouldered by San Diego? We all have to do our part. And so, yes, I will do what I can to make sure that there's sensible regulations at the state level to make sure that every city is contributing to solving our housing crisis, because San Diego can't do it by itself. And in the issues in the legislation that I've seen, I've been a strong advocate for San Diego, making sure that provisions that are not good for our city are removed from those bills. And I will continue to be a fierce advocate for our city. But at the end of the day, if we're going to solve this crisis and have the many dozens of cities that are not doing their fair share of housing production, it may require state intervention, and that is good for San Diego, because it's important that every city do its part to solve the biggest issue facing the state, which is housing affordability.
Thank you. Barbara, the floor is yours.
I believe San Diegans should be making decisions about what gets built in our neighborhoods, not Sacramento. Our local planning groups are the basis of democracy. It is true neighborhood grassroots participation. Yes, we need to build housing for all San Diegans. We need to build housing for our janitors, our security guard workers, and our hotel workers, who are a key part in our San Diego economy. And we are addressing that through a tougher inclusionary housing ordinance, more affordable units built on site for families earning $30,000 a year and up. We are addressing it by updating our community plans and increasing density around transit, which as a member of the council I did over a week ago for the Balboa and Morena Boulevard corridors. And in that community, I was able to add an amendment that 15% of the new housing built in the Morena corridor community will be in that community. 15% affordable will be built in that community and not off-site. Today, I read in the LA Times that housing production statewide is down because of higher costs, higher materials costs. Thank you, Donald Trump. Higher labor costs. We need more skilled construction workers, and that's part of an education system. And higher government fees, which is how we pay for our infrastructure because of Proposition 13. So what can the state do? They can backfill the fees, which are $50,000 to $100,000 per housing unit. The state has billions of dollars in reserves. The state can do a statewide revenue bond. This is how we should be paying for fees so that we can build appropriate infrastructure in every community, a new library in Southeast San Diego, a new playground in Southeast San Diego. The wealthier communities in the north get big developer fees, so there's a gorgeous new rec center in Pacific Highlands Ranch. The state has an important role to play.
Thank you, Councilmember Bree. So I have a follow-up about this specific issue, so particularly to Tasha and Barbara. So when you are saying, it's really easy to say locally that we should oppose Sacramento making decisions for San Diegans, but it's important to note that when you're doing that, and as you sit on the Democratic Party stage, that you're criticizing Democratic leadership in Sacramento, and you're criticizing Democrats who are elected from San Diego. So the question is, we have to talk about the platform, so this is why you're here, so stop. So the question would be, is if you don't think, so what better should Sacramento be doing specifically? And then how do you answer, when you have people who are homeless, who see cities who are failing them? I am a former homeless person myself. How do you go to tell that person, and how are you, if you're a state legislator, how do you go and tell that homeless person that we can't do anything, that we should just leave it up to local control? So that's the question. It's a really tough issue because local control is a very popular and important thing. Communities do have to have input on that, but how do you address that sort of balance of equities?
I am a lifelong Democrat. I have spent my life standing up for others, challenging the status quo and getting things done. The city council in Los Angeles, which is all Democrats, voted unanimously to oppose this state legislation because they were afraid of what it could do to their communities. So this is not an issue where all Democrats agree. I only know what we are doing in San Diego, and we are updating community plans to allow for more density around transit. We have increased our in-lieu fee. We have made it tougher on developers to require them to build more affordable housing when they build new projects. We are doing all the right things. What the state now needs to do is help us. They can help us by backfilling the fees, the $50,000 to $100,000 per unit, which pays for the infrastructure that all of our communities deserve and need. That is what the state can do. At the same time, we have a housing bond measure moving forward toward the November ballot, and that could be a $900 million bond measure that would provide 5,000 to 8,000 new supportive housing units in the next 5 years. We are doing our part in San Diego. As mayor, I will make sure we stay doing our part, and we will build more housing. We will need help from the state.
Tasha, specific, what you would like to see from the state and said.
So first, before I touch on that, and I know I got a minute. Is it 2 minutes?
Yeah, you got a minute.
Okay, great. Don't.
Good luck.
I would prefer that people ask me what my intentions was instead of telling me what my intentions are when I speak. And so I am not at all speaking against the state or another Democrat. But let's be real, because we have some issues with democracy. And when I look at democracy, it's not as exclusionary. People are not sitting all at the tables. Hell, the state, feds, local, they don't even work together. Like, how you create something that a city council is going to vote no to. So what I plan to do is make sure that we're sitting at the table before we create these nonsense regulations, rules, ordinance, and laws, so that we can make sure we're doing things that are for the people and about the people, and that we've talked to the people first. We are really good at campaigning when we want to win, but we are horrible when we get in these seats about going back to the people and making sure that we're doing the business of the people.
Thank you, Tasha. And Todd.
I just want to remind people that in the last election, we overwhelmingly passed 2 state bonds on housing and services to keep people housed, Propositions 1 and 2. In this most recent state budget, we increased by hundreds of millions of dollars the state's commitment to updating community plans and helping cities to actually build more housing. And the fact of the matter is we are also bringing back funds to improve communities, working to get millions of dollars to build a pool that the Jackie Robinson YMCA. That was a collaborative effort between Assembly members Gonzalez, Weber, and myself, as well as money to repair our Balboa Park. The list goes on and on. We are focused on doing this stuff, but clearly it's not enough. In the last 10 years, the city of San Diego has built 27,000 new homes for the top of the market, for the richest of the rich. We've built 4,400 homes for the very low and low income San Diegans, and we've only built 33 homes for our middle class. This is the status quo that we must disrupt. In a Gloria administration, we will prioritize the construction of working and middle class housing so that more people have a fighting chance to be able to live in this city with a roof over their head at a price they can afford.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates. Sticking with housing, and it started to come up a bit there as well. You know, when it comes to housing, much of the conversation focuses on building out our supply in ways to incentivize developers, but there's not as much focus, especially when there are people who point out maybe, you know, just building out the supply isn't enough. So what would you do, or what needs to be done to support more low and moderate and middle income housing in addition to simply building more units? And we start with Todd on this question.
Easy enough. Yeah. So I think there's a lot that we can do. I just made mention of the fact that we have to prioritize where we're not building the housing, frankly, where the demand is the greatest for people like you and I who need a place to live in a price they can afford. So it's about not prioritizing the $1 million condos that are on the top of the 40-story building, but something that you and I can actually afford to live in. It's about utilizing our public lands in a better way to make sure that if we do redevelop the city hall, that we're building housing that city workers and people like us can afford to live in. And of course, it's about doing other innovative things. you know, I made mention a moment ago, 4,400 homes over the last 10 years for low-income people. That's not enough for the need, but it's certainly more than what was done for the middle class of this city. So why not use the same tools that we've done for low-income people and use them for the middle class? Establish a middle-class housing trust fund where the employers who are coming into town who are paying their employees a good wage, but they still can't make ends meet, have them pay into this fund and actually provide the monies that are necessary to get these projects actually built. We can do a lot of things. We also must protect tenants in this town. And the fact of the matter is the rent is going up extremely high. And we can do more as a city to make sure that people stay housed, and when they lose their housing, to keep them housed or get them back into housing. I think that there's a broader vision of production, of preservation, and of protection that will make us be able to solve this housing crisis and, like the climate plan, start it here but replicate it across California.
Thank you. Barbara, same question.
Thank you. The council last week also passed a middle income density bonus to give developers the right to build extra units if they were building housing that a nurse could afford, 2 school teachers, a firefighter, a police officer, a librarian. This is one step toward creating more affordable housing for working families. Second, we can do more with public land, with long-term leases on public land, on land owned by Caltrans, land owned by the city, land owned by the various school districts around the county, land owned by the city. We really should do an inventory of all of this land and develop it on 99-year leases so that at the end of the day we retain control. We also need to look at new types of construction. There are new types of modular construction which bring down the cost of housing. It's being used in other parts of the country, and this can help us bring down the cost and make housing more affordable. And we also have things to do within our bureaucracy at City Hall. We can streamline the permitting process, particularly when a project is a by right development. It should take only a few weeks for us to get it approved. Time is money. It costs developers money when their project is sitting on someone's desk and they aren't able to start construction. So we have our role to play at the city. And as mayor, I will personally engage within a reorganization of our development services department so that it is customer friendly in an appropriate way when it is a by right development that has already been approved under environmental impact reviews.
Thank you. Tasha, same question.
Thank you. So for me, I believe that we have to look at things in a real way. We have land in the city that is vacant. We have buildings in the city that are vacant. We are wasting millions on top of millions of dollars by just letting these properties sit. We need to become landlords. We need to develop these properties and start to house people, just like they did on C Street when the shelter flooded. It was easy. We began to shelter people. As a city, we have too much money that we have allowed to mismanage, that we have no fiscal oversight of, and we have land. We have land that we don't need to go to places like Del Mar and other places. We have land and buildings that are not being used. Why aren't we using those properties? Why aren't we developing on those properties? Why aren't we maintaining those properties? As your mayor, we will. When we look at Kansas City, as Todd is saying, looking at other areas, Kansas City became landlords. They developed on their land, city-owned land. They developed on buildings that were vacant, and they were able to house tens of thousands of people. And they were able to make sure that it was affordable in a real way because they were the landlords. We need to take control, but we also need to take responsibility for the properties and the damage that we have done because we have lost control and oversight over the things that we have control over, the land, the property. We could be housing people right now. We are not looking at deficits. When I hear people talking about bonds, we haven't even paid off the $74 million deficit we're in. When are we going to start paying on these things? When are we going to stop spending recklessly and looking at measures and things that we are going to do without making sure there's an investment and there's money that we understand?
Thank you.
Let's start housing people. We can do it as a city with our own
Thank
property
you,
and our
Tasha.
own land.
Thank you.
All right, so the next question actually came from our survey. There were a lot of questions both ways on police accountability. There was actually a fairly equal distribution of those asking about making police more accountable through things like an independent commission, but then also those who are arguing that police are being handcuffed or limited. So how do you feel the current state of relationships or relations between the police and the community, and do you believe there needs to be greater oversight, and what form should it take? And the first, that goes to Barbara.
In talking with community residents of color, they tell me that they do not trust our police force. They tell me they feel unsafe in their community, and they tell me that they are unfairly targeted. That is not acceptable. And if that is true, and if that is the case, we are all not safe. We only have safe communities where everyone trusts the police department and we have neighborhood policing that works. That is why I have been a strong advocate for an independent police review commission with teeth. I supported it for the 2018 ballot. We did not have the votes. I support it this time around. I view it as a key piece in building a community where residents will feel they have a safe place to turn if they are unfairly targeted or victimized by our police department.
Thank you. Tasha, same question to you.
Did you say Tasha?
Yes.
We're both T's. So I could go on, but I'm going to try and keep it short. First 100 days, we are going to create a commission of community members that are going to look at all the records of officers, and we are going to release rogue officers from their positions. We are going to be looking for a new chief because the current chief cannot be trusted. He has covered up for his other officers. That is why there are pipelines into MTS, into the DA's office, into the sheriff's department. It is a pipeline. When I posted, your chief talks about transparency, but nobody knows what the hell is going on in SDPD. You know why? Because he keeps it silent. That's not transparency. When we have officers that are sleeping in the headquarters building, having sex, when we have officers who are soliciting minors, when we have officers who are allowing people to die because they deny medical assistance, it is a problem. And it has been a problem for a long time. And when we have people who are silent and people who will criminalize the poor, I'm scared. I'm scared to vote for them. I'm scared because we have been criminalized all our lives, and the time is up. The time is now. We are going to stop it. So we're going to be a sweeping sea of change when we talk about police accountability. Rogue officers do not belong here. We do not want them, and they will be having to look for another job somewhere else. The chief will either have to retire because he will be fired. We are not playing anymore. When we talk about all of us, it is all of us. It is LGBTQ, it is black, it is Muslim, it is special needs, it is white, it is poor white, it is Asian, it is Pan-Asian, it is everyone in this continent, whether they were born here or whether they came here. Everyone deserves to have dignity. In my community, it lacks.
Thank you, Tasha.
And what I have learned is people have been silent.
Thank
And
you.
it's time for us not to be silent anymore.
Thank you. Todd, same question regarding.
The best way to determine what someone's going to do is to look at what they have done. When I was on the city council, I authored Measure G. It was the last piece of police reform legislation that went before the voters. It passed overwhelmingly. It mandated that the Community Review Board review all in-custody deaths as well as all officer-involved shootings. But we know that more must be done. And I want to say I absolutely and wholeheartedly support an independent commission with its own independent counsel. I also supported Dr. Shirley Weber's bill, Assembly Bill 392, which is groundbreaking legislation in the state of California that I hope will help set a tone for the entire nation. So that's what I have done. What will we do is, of course, what we must do is to reject the notion that you can be supportive and demand police reform and not support our police department. We have to demand the highest standards from the officers who are given the ability to arrest and to kill. And that means accountability, that means transparency, not just from the rank and file members, but from the very top. And of course, in our form of government, that is the mayor. We have to do more. I look forward to this ongoing conversation at the City Council, which I think will be successful. But I hope that ultimately what we can do here in San Diego is create a model that can be replicated elsewhere. We enjoy some of the lowest crime rates in the nation, and we've done it with a very thin police department. Let's be one of the lowest crime communities in the nation with one of the most transparent and accountable police departments in the nation. That's how you create trust with communities, and that's what we will do.
Thank you. Thank you all. So, staying on the topic of public safety, and bear with me on this one because I know this may be a bit off base from what you're used to. But, this past week, past 2 weeks, we've seen really just horrific violence. And really, if you look back over the last few years, we've seen a steady rise in, domestic terrorism, particularly from white nationalists and white supremacists. San Diego itself, and I believe one of you actually alluded to the fact that we had seen a rise in hate crimes earlier. There was 8 just in the last year. So, I go through all this, and, the thing that I really would like to know is, as mayor, you're still head of public safety, ultimately. And yes, the federal government can do a lot of things to address this, but I'm wondering, is there anything you see as mayor as an option to help local law enforcement combat this threat, particularly from white nationalists and white supremacists, and God forbid, what can be done to prepare to mitigate any potential damage if there were an attack? And starting with Tasha on that question.
Thank you. I think that we are going to have to do this as a whole city, from the home, the schools, the streets, the government, and the police department. But what we're going to have to admit is that we have some of those white nationalists in our police department. That's what we're going to have to admit. What we're going to have to admit is that this city is great about sex trafficking. It's great about gangs. It's great about how they target and suppress those types of people, but it has not dealt with its own racism and racists that live among them. It has not had intel. It does not target them in the way that it has targeted us. And so I would be looking to tell our police department, what are we doing to make sure that there are not black or any people, but black people have been targeted the most, is what you should know. Black people have been beaten with bats in 2019, 2018, kicked in the head and the face, hit with fists by white nationalists, extremists. I call them domestic terrorists. And so when we talk about terrorism, we need to look not farther than our own city, because we need to deal with domestic terrorism. It is racism. I will not call it bias or implicit bias. That is a comfortable word for white people that they created, and I will not do it. It is racism, and you need to deal with it. We are going to have to deal with racism as it is. When somebody can be walking around in Pacific Beach yelling those damn niggas and not one person speak, that is what we got to deal with. We have to deal with your complicit, your silence, your acceptance. Every white person in Pacific Beach that heard that white woman in that parking lot should have said something to her. Everyone should have spoke up, because if it's really all of us, then be all of us and be in this. Don't let people discriminate that look like you towards people that look like me and others.
Thank you. Thank you, Tasha. Todd, same question.
I think the most effective way that we can stop the surge of white nationalists and racism and violence in this community is to get rid of Donald Trump in 2020. The question is, what would I do as mayor? And obviously the tone is set at the top. Reflect on the fact that the city has never in its history despite being immediately adjacent to Mexico and Tijuana, has ever elected a person of color to the mayor's office. And so if you want to see change, it requires different people to be able to serve in positions of leadership to change that tone at the very top. But the fact of the matter is, we know that people have prejudice and hate, and they will act out. The question is, do they have the tools of terror and of murder to actually accomplish what they're up to? I have been unafraid in the legislature to stand up to the NRA and pursue sensible gun safety legislation to make sure that every neighborhood is kept safe. And you have my word, and I was speaking with Governor Newsom just this morning to remind him I have a bill I'm working to put on his desk to end gun shows at the Del Mar Fairgrounds, because the state should not be complicit in putting guns into our neighborhoods and to harm our residents. We can do a lot. We must do a lot. And the last thing I would say is, as a border city, it's the biggest border city, it's important for the mayor of San Diego to speak out on what is going on at our border. I spent my afternoon there just today. I'll give our mayor some credit. He does go on national TV every now and again to call out the fact that our border is important, that it's an asset and not a liability. But he only does it in economic terms. We need to have a mayor that speaks about the border in personal terms. 2 cities, 1 heart. Families are being broken up. Children are being snatched from their parents. We can't talk about this in dollars and cents and in wait times, although those are important. This is about real people, and that's what the mayor of San Diego must be talking about on a daily basis to make sure that people understand that our border is an asset, not a liability.
Thank you. Barbara, same question.
In a terrifying time when you're afraid to go to your church, your mosque, or your synagogue. And it's terrifying at the amount of security that religious organizations have to pay for today in order for their parishioners to feel safe. And our children are growing up witnessing all of that. This is one of the saddest things of all. Racism and anti-Semitism of any type are unacceptable. And as a mayor, I will personally visit multiple types of synagogues, mosques, and churches to demonstrate that all San Diegans should feel safe in their house of worship, and that all San Diegans should be valued, whatever they believe in. Early on, after I'd been elected, there were a lot of turned out hoax phone calls to the Jewish Community Center in my district with bomb threats. And we do have a good partnership in this community in an appropriate way between local law enforcement, our police, our sheriffs, the FBI, and Homeland Security, not to target people, our residents, but to make sure that we all are safe. But one of my thoughts is we have a gang database. We should have a white nationalist database. Where we should be tracking the activities of people who have shown they can do more harm than any of us could ever have imagined.
Thank you.
So, now I don't know where I want to go with that. Because the gang database is an interesting thing to talk about. That's what I was thinking of shifting to. So let's talk about the gang database and your feelings about that. And then build it onto sort of a larger follow-up. Some of the policies that we enact at the city, like vehicle habitation ordinance or things that or MTS, for example, actually unfairly target specific underrepresented communities. Now, there are 2 members of the elected community. The VHO existed under you, Todd, and it was re-implemented and fell out of office fell out of effect recently. So what are you going to do as mayor to better ensure that the policies out of San Diego don't unfairly target communities of color and underrepresented communities, and then also talk about the gang database? I'll give them 2 minutes for this, and we'll start with who's next? Actually, Todd's next.
Let me address the gang database. Dr. Shirley Weber has carried, of course, landmark legislation, as she always does, to address this issue. The faithful implementation of that state legislation is critical to make sure that this is the tool of law enforcement and not a tool of racism and of discrimination. On the issue of unequitable treatment, I want to be clear that the law that we passed while I was on the city council prohibited the parking of RVs for extended period of time in community. And in that particular city council here, I raised the issue of what does this mean for the poorest amongst us. And the mayor's office commitment at the time was that they would find a way to implement safe vehicle parking. The fact of the matter is that has been poorly executed. I'm sure most of you have seen the stories in the press of the parking lot in Mission Valley near Qualcomm that very few people are utilizing. This goes back to my point about not doing dumb stuff. It is dumb to criminalize sleeping in your car and provide services where no one wants to go. Maybe someone should have asked a homeless person where they would be able to stay in a way that is safe, in a way that they would seek services, because sleeping in your car is nothing we should be proud of. It should be that we are working like hell to get people out of their cars and into proper housing. And that should be the goal. So the inequitable treatment, I mean, it is there and we have to push back against it. I would not have supported the criminalization of sleeping in your car. We recognize that that is far preferable to sleeping on the streets. Ultimately, Will, I mean, this is a struggle. I mean, we are entering a new day in this city and in the state and in this nation, where voices that have been for too long shut out of the political process are standing up and asking to be seen and asking to be heard. As mayor, you have my commitment that I will be listening closely and working aggressively to make sure that equity is at the center of our policies. Obviously, the vehicle habitation ordinance was not equitable.
Thank you. Barbara, and again, you have 2 minutes.
Yes, so I did allude to the gang database, and I'm very grateful that Dr. Weber authored legislation which needs to be closely monitored so that young people are not unfairly trapped in a system for 1 or 2 things they may have done as a young person. We all do 1 or 2 things as a young person that we probably regret we did, and if we grew up in La Jolla, we probably didn't get caught for doing it. The mayor has implemented the safe parking program poorly. That's one of my frustrations of being a council member. One of my major frustrations is, we have spent more and more money on homelessness. I can't even get a complete accounting. I often feel like I have to do a PRA to get information on what City Hall is doing. The money we're spending on our homeless is buried in many departments. It's buried in our police department because we're spending police overtime for the storage center. It's buried in our Parks and Rec budget because we're keeping the bathrooms open in Balboa Park 24 hours a day and paying for security. I think we should be doing these things. I'm not sure about the police overtime at the storage center, but I think the bathrooms in Balboa Park are something we should be doing. But the key is we just need to know what we're doing, how much we're spending, and then we can start to make intelligent decisions about what programs are working. I think we need to hold programs accountable and demand outcomes, and that's the only way we're going to be able to work toward resolving our homeless situation.
Thank you.
Say it one more time.
Tasha.
Can you say the question one more time? I'm sorry.
So we talked about the
Gang documentation, I got that one.
I know you got that one. We're talking about how certain policies unfairly target different communities. Particularly, we were talking about the vehicle habitation ordinance and how that sort of builds into an overall narrative about policies like the gang documentation that unfairly target communities of color.
Right. So I'm going to talk about the gang documentation really quick because it was a racist documentation that was started. And this database was racist. And so we need to talk about the racism of the gang database. So when you have infants that are black on a gang database, it is not about what an infant can do to commit a crime that didn't make sense or was some. We have people that are targeted, their entire families in communities that I live in, that I work in, that I know these families in. They are targeted. Not one person, not one that sits in a political seat thought about saturating communities with services. They automatically went to saturating communities with suppression. And what we know from years, almost a century, is that suppression is not the answer alone. And that when we have communities that are disenfranchised, when we have people who live in poverty, that there are services and supports and an investment that is needed to pull them out. Do you not think that people who live in District 8 can't community police their own neighborhoods? We do it every day. We have reduced crime with police and their tactics, not side by side all the time, but there are many people who are reducing crime in that neighborhood without police. When we talk about criminalizing the poor, I will be decriminalizing the poor. We have a decriminalization program that we are going to be working on with communities who have been impacted the most. Communities that have been impacted the most. And we are talking about real equity, because we've been talking about it for a long time and it hasn't happened. I'm tired of hearing about equity and equality in 2019. It will be 2020, and if we don't have it, it's a problem. You have to want to vote for somebody who is going to actually implement things.
Thank you. Thank you. So first off, congrats. We've made it to what will be our final question of the night. And thank you, audience, all, for coming out. I'm really glad we had this opportunity to hear from the candidates. So with our last question, and this kind of alludes to something, or ties back to something that I think all of you have touched on to a certain extent earlier in our conversation. You know, the cost of living is obviously a serious problem for many San Diegans, and you know, whether you're someone who's lived here for decades and you just haven't seen your income rise with the growing cost of living, or someone just fresh out of school who really can't build a life here because of it. My question is, what is your vision for promoting economic opportunity for all San Diegans? And please offer at least one specific idea or program you have in mind to kind of pursue that goal. And we start with Barbara on this question.
So I come out of the tech world. I spent 30 years as a tech entrepreneur before running for city council. The innovation economy, biotech and high tech, creates the highest paying jobs and good service sector jobs around them. And our employers are going to have a shortage of skilled workers if we don't do something about training our homegrown talent, the children who are growing up in all parts of San Diego. You've heard about my vision for a technology center downtown, and we already have fairly good transit coming into downtown from the south and from the east. It would alleviate some of the terrible commute in the morning where people are commuting north to good jobs in the north. My commitment to you is to build an inclusive economy around tech and biotech that benefits all of our children. I have the ability to do it. I've been doing it for my whole life. I know what to do to create industries. This is essential to the future of our city, and we can do it in a way that is equitable. We can enhance our internship program to connect to careers. The mayor has a bully pulpit to truly engage employers in engaging with our schools so that children from the time they're in preschool and kindergarten understand the different kinds of opportunities that are available to them if they stay in school. So this is my commitment as a mayor. I am the right mayor to lead this effort. It will require bringing in new companies to San Diego. It will require bringing capital into San Diego. And this is what I have been doing for 30 years. I know how to build industries and build companies.
Thank you. Tasha, same question to you.
Thank you. Thank you. So when we think about economics, we need to start with our kids. We need to start in our schools. Our schools in some of the communities are failing. And so the things that we are going to do is we are going to open up those neighborhoods and those communities, and we're going to plant with community members programs so that kids can begin to thrive, that kids can choose career paths or college paths, that they have support outside of the school district because we have no say in the district, that we are going to make sure that it is real equity, that when people are failing and there are people that are succeeding because of a zip code, we are going to change that, because barriers of south of 8 and north of 8 stop us from being able to be educated and our kids being able to go into promising jobs or colleges and careers. We're going to eliminate that. We're going to make sure that those kids catch up and that they are doing the things that they need to do. We're going to make sure we're bringing jobs not only here, but we're reducing barriers into city employment. Nobody is talking about the deficit of city employees that we have currently in our city. No one is talking about competitive salaries and changing it. No one is talking about changing the pensions. No one is talking about that the firefighters haven't had raises in so long that they can't even afford to live. We have to change the way we do business every day. We are going to create a real grant department where we are looking at grants from all over the country and the nation, I should say, excuse me, so that we can bring in revenue as well. We want to make sure that we're not just working with the tech world, but we're working with every inch of every part of careers that our people can walk into, because not everyone is going to go into a career of technology. We want to make sure that we open it up so that careers are attainable for people that live here, but that our children are growing up knowing that they can become career-oriented, knowing that it is available to them, knowing that they have competitive salaries and pensions, and that they will be able to live in housing that is really, really affordable. Thank you.
Thank you. Todd, the same question regarding economic opportunity.
So it's an important question, and I believe in inclusive economic development. Meaning to say that we're not focused on giveaways and subsidies to corporations, but that we're focused on the fact that education and housing are the best drivers of economic growth if we choose to engage in them. I will not be a mayor that says education is not my problem and that is someone else's responsibility. This will be a priority because that's how you build strong neighborhoods. Every neighborhood deserves to have a great school. We should have district-only elections for our school districts. We should hold our school district accountable for moving forward and improving and putting the best teachers in the best classrooms to invest in our children. But even when we do that, we know that the kids who get the great educations, and I represent most of the universities in our community. When I go to UCSD or SDSU, after we've subsidized their educations, we send these kids and we give them we invest in them and we give them skills and talents, and then we show them the exit door because they can't afford the rent here and they can never see being able to buy a home here in San Diego after we have made that investment in them. And so good housing policy is good economic opportunity, and that is inclusive economic development. Charles, you can apply for that, okay, yeah. You asked about a concrete idea. The San Diego Workforce Partnership a little over a year ago put out a report identifying the fact that we have 41,000 young people in San Diego who are not connected to either the worlds of education or of work. If I had everything I had needed in order to address our housing crisis, the fact of the matter is we don't have enough people to swing the hammers and dig the ditches to make sure that these homes get built. So what is an idea? Let's engage those 41,000 youth. Let's work with our construction trades and our unions to give them the kinds of skills that are good paying jobs that allow them to live in this community and help them build the homes that we need to make sure that this community, where we have thriving job growth, actually has the people to fill those vacant positions. I will be a mayor of inclusive economic opportunity, not tax breaks and giveaways to corporations.
Thank you. Thank you all. So that brings us to our closing comments from all of our candidates, and we're going to begin the same way we started the evening. Tasha, you have the floor.
Thank you. I hope today, I want to say thank you to all of you for being here, sticking this out. I know it's been hot up here, but thank you all for coming. Thank you for being a part of this democracy. One of the things that I want to leave with you is how important your vote is, how important it is to make sure that you stay woke, that your vote has a conscience, and that your vote will impact not just you, but millions of people here in the city of San Diego. And that when we talk about inclusivity, when we talk about all of us, that we make sure we're voting for someone who is really going to do something courageous, who has been courageous, who has made the changes that need to happen, not for the few, not for the developers, not just for the police, but for all of us. Let's make sure that we're making our vote count, because this is a democracy. This is the land where people are supposed to be free. This is a home where there are many people who are brave. And one thing I'm going to say lastly is that it takes courage. It takes courage to stand up here. And I applaud my opponents and their courage for being politicians this long. But I want to tell you that we have got to make sweeping change, and you have got to push hard, because your vote is what will do the push. And you have got to make sure that those that you are supporting and those that you are voting understand what all of us means, and what inclusivity means, and how we're going to deal with racism, and how we're going to have a better economy that is equitable and equal for all, with education and everything. Thank you.
Todd, same question to you.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Will. Thank you to all of you for your patience, and of course to our San Diego County Democratic Party for hosting tonight's forum. Sure. A lot of volunteer working into this. You can tell what I will do as mayor by the work that I've done. Bold leadership, the kind of leadership that we've been craving for so long, bold, progressive, democratic leadership, visions that can actually get implemented and get done. Passing a minimum wage and earned sick leave ordinance. It wasn't easy. I lost my council presidency over it, but 250,000 people got a pay raise. That's worth fighting for. A bold climate action plan that people said was pie in the sky, but now everyone is doing it too. Pushing to make sure that we protect our dreamers and immigrant communities, standing up to the NRA for sensible gun safety legislation. This campaign is about finally bringing bold, progressive leadership to the mayor's office, and you've seen me do it as a city council member, as a council president, as an interim mayor, and as a state assembly member. It was made mention that City Hall is a mess. Well, who better than the son of a maid and a gardener to clean up City Hall? I'm running for mayor because I believe in what we can do as a city. I believe that we can end chronic homelessness in San Diego. I believe that we can build a world-class public transportation system that serves every community. That we can put a roof over the head of every San Diegan at a price that they can afford. I believe that we can be a global leader when it comes to climate action. I believe that we can sensibly reform our criminal justice system. I believe that we can create the circumstances where every San Diegan can see a future for themselves in every neighborhood of this great city. I believe that we should reject the idea of being America's finest city. I believe we should dare to be a great city. And so I ask you tonight to believe in San Diego, because that's why I am running for mayor. I believe in this city. I believe in what you and I can do together. My name is Todd Gloria. It is time for a mayor that works for all of us.
Thank you. Barbara, last word.
Housing, homelessness, transit, scooters, climate change. We've discussed a wide range of issues tonight that face our city and our next mayor. And there will be more issues that we don't know about today. I've spent my life dealing with the unknown and making things happen and getting things done. I'm a mom, a grandma, a community volunteer. Most importantly, I've been the Bobby Sox team manager for my 2 daughters. And I'm very proud of them. And I've started and led 2 organizations that empower women. And as I told you earlier, I was a reporter holding government officials accountable and learning to listen and to ask questions and to be relentless in getting the story. You deserve a mayor, and I want to be that mayor who will be relentless for you, who will make City Hall work for you, and will make sure that quality city services are delivered in every neighborhood, and that San Diegans, not Sacramento, stay in control of what happens in our city. I have spent my life challenging the status quo, standing up for others, and getting things done. The diversity of my life experiences has prepared me to be your next mayor. I've opened one campaign committee, Barbara Bree for San Diego Mayor 2020. I'm definitely running for mayor. After declaring for mayor, Mr. Gloria opened a 2020 Gloria for Assembly committee. I want to know, and has raised money into it. Mr. Gloria, I want to know what office you are running for. Your choice in this election is clear, between a change agent with a track record of success or more of the same. I would be honored to have your support.
All right, so that concludes our forum for today. Thank you to the candidates. How about another round of applause for our candidates? We live streamed this, and it should be available on our Facebook for those of you or if you have friends who aren't there. But other than that, have a nice night. Bye.
Where I grew up, in order to make a place for yourself, you had to fight for it. Like many, I came to San Diego to serve in the United States Marine Corps. But that was when the military discriminated against gay people like me. Though I'd served my country, I got kicked out of a job I loved for being who I am. I ended up homeless, living out of my car, but I kept fighting. I survived. And now I have the honor of serving as the chair of the San Diego County Democratic Party. My story is not unique. I'm a Democrat because I believe our party is the party of social and economic justice. We believe that all people deserve access to high-quality health care and public education, period. We know that action must be taken now to halt the existential threat of climate change. We support housing the homeless and making it more affordable for everyone to find a place to live here. We fight every day for civil rights, human rights, and the rights of working families, the backbone of our country. As Democrats, our party is the party of the people. And by working together, we've helped make the politics and policies of our region more progressive. We do that by electing leaders who truly represent our dynamic and diverse communities. And that starts by organizing on the ground, by supporting and training great candidates, and by registering and mobilizing voters so that they can make their voices heard. This is year-round, long-term work that requires a united effort. Because in the Democratic Party, our power is not consolidated in one person. It's in all of us. That is our real strength. On behalf of all the people we fight for, on behalf of everyone who's counting on us right now, I ask that you give your time, your resources, and your commitment to our cause. Our challenges are many. By working together, our potential has no bounds.